This is from a series of interviews that I shot in January of 2021 for the Mind, Body, Soul documentary project, where we will be hiking the Continental Divide Trail and exploring the effects that nature has on our well-being. To find out more about the project, visit mindbodysoulfilm.com.
My name is Annie Nelson. We are on the ancestral Dakota lands, originally, the 7 council fires, and now known as Afton State Park, and we're in the St. Croix River Valley in eastern Minnesota. Right now I work in social services and public assistance for a county, so I help people. One of the amazing things I got to do in 2020 was distribute $360,000 to people who were at risk of eviction or utility disconnection because of COVID-19. So I helped people who had almost died from COVID, month in the hospital on a ventilator, come home, not able to work because their lungs are so damaged, and make sure those folks didn't end up homeless. So that's what I do right now. For me, when I was growing up as a kid, the outdoors were recreation. It was something that we did on vacation. So I think probably my first really potent memory as a kid was our week-long camping trip on the North Shore in Minnesota. That was like the trip I learned how to build a fire and, climbed up a rock cliff that felt huge. And when I went back as an adult, I realized it was about 10 feet tall.
So how did you discover your connection to nature?
I had some rough experiences when I was a kid, and I started using drugs pretty early. And I think that part of that was feeling drawn to other kids who were, because we kind of were a little bit, we'd kind of dealt with stuff more. And I don't know. So a lot of people are self-medicating, right, with substances out there. And I was kind of drawn to the kids who were probably at that age because we had things in common. But I was an alcoholic all of my 20s.
So what did the drugs and alcohol do for you?
They allowed me to completely control how I felt at all times. So if I had any kind of distress, or I was unhappy or bored, or I was happy but I wanted to be happier, right? I mean, come on. Getting drunk is fun. Okay, it's just a good time. And unfortunately, when you're an alcoholic or an addict, it stops being a good time and starts being a compulsion. The most serious symptoms I had with my addiction was severe depression and anxiety, which I, of course, was not aware of. Like, I thought everything outside of me needed to be fixed, and then I would be fine, even though I was, drinking every day. Like, I hadn't connected that dot yet. And or I hadn't admitted that I needed to do anything about that. Like, I was kind of one of those folks who kind of understood I was an alcoholic, but I was still going to work, I was still functioning, so like, who cares? This is what brings me joy. But it wasn't. Yeah, I've got this whole theory about drugs and alcohol, which is they trick you. So every drug, it's whatever it appears to be promising you in the beginning, it's opposite game, because that's what it will ultimately take from you. Like, for me, drinking was, I drank because it made me happy, right? And what did drinking ultimately do to me? It made me miserable, okay? I went through 4 different psychologists. The last one broke up with me, like literally fired me, because she was like, I cannot help you until you stop drinking, And God bless her for being honest with me. And then when I was about 28, 29, something like that, my cousins took me into the Boundary Waters on a canoe trip for the first time. I'd never been, and it was like a revelation. It was an amazing experience, and I completely fell head over heels in love. Actually, that trip to the Boundary Waters helped me get sober, because it was the first time in like 5 years that I didn't drink for 5 days. And it like cleared my head enough for me to like get a taste of what I had been missing out on for so long. Like, the beauty got me higher than any drug or alcohol ever could. And it wasn't like an icky high, like drugs and alcohol. They just always have such an icky that you can feel them costing you something. Like, sure, the pleasure is quick and fast, but it doesn't it's eating away at you the whole time too. So, and that's not what nature's never doing that. Like it's this natural high and it's just building you up the whole time. So I was like, oof, I gotta change something right now. But I didn't get sober right away. I went back to drinking for a while, but then I had a second experience where I was walking my dog into this incredible sunset. I mean, like intellectually, I could see that it was an amazing sunset, and I couldn't feel any of it. I felt no joy. It didn't, you just heard me talking about how nature makes my soul sing, okay? Like that's my jam. And I felt nothing. And I knew then that something was like really wrong with me. Because my whole life that had been my reaction to that, right? So that was, and I think it was maybe a month later that I finally went to treatment. When I was 30, I got sober. And then it was just basically like, because I was sober and stable and not spending all of my money and time drinking, then I got to start exploring, and it really makes me wonder like what I would have accomplished if I hadn't developed an addiction and what I would have done in my 20s. If I hadn't spent my 20s drinking, in college, I did spend a lot of time in the outdoors. I had a boyfriend who was really into the outdoors and we went camping like every weekend, but it was always camping and drinking, or camping, it was always camping and partying. And, so it makes me wonder now, but so it was like finally I got the addiction out of the way and I was able to follow that life-affirming connection I felt in nature out of my dark period. So, and then a lot of my friends in the cities weren't into camping, so I started just going on solo trips, and that led me into backpacking, and then I've basically spent the last 5 years of my life doing crazier and crazier things. I feel like I kind of tripped and fell over myself into backpacking in general, and then the NCT as well. So my cousins took me to the BWCA. I was desperate to get that feeling back. So I was just like trying to improve my skills. So I was going up to the edge of the Boundary Waters to camp at a car campground to just like I just wanted to get close to it, right? And on the way up there, I accidentally found the Superior Hiking Trail, which is a 300-mile stretch of the North Country Trail. So then I was like, oh, okay, well maybe I'll try that. And so then my next trip, I went out, actually backpacked for the first time, like tried to do it right. That was the trip I thought I was going to die on. And then ended up 4 days later on the shore of Lake Superior with my dog falling asleep. And me like, I am the baddest ass person in the world, right? I felt so empowered after that trip. I was in love with everything in myself. So, and so then I thru-hiked that trail shortly after that. I did the whole thing in one stretch. And then I was just looking kind of for my next, I think for me, I was really I was underestimating my abilities. So I always was like choosing like less than I can actually do. And so the North Country Trail was me finally admitting to myself that I was capable of doing something like a thru hike on the Appalachian Trail, like 2,000 miles-ish. My original goal was to hike half of the trail, which is, I set 2,400 miles was my original goal. So the North Country Trail runs from Vermont to North Dakota. It's America's longest national scenic trail. There are 11 national scenic trails in America. The most famous are the Appalachian Trail and the Pacific Crest Trail. But the North Country Trail is the longest, and it runs through my favorite woods, the North Woods, which are really special and overlooked, I think, as a biome. They straddle this, what's called the Laurentian Divide area, which creates like a super diverse ecosystem and really unique. And then also the section I hiked, I specifically chose because it ran along the Great Lakes for 1,000 miles, which are incredible. and also have this, they're so big that they create their own weather systems, which impact the forest around them. And there's a very specific feel to a Lake Superior forest, and that I love. So, so I decided to try. So I wanted a long distance experience like the Appalachian Trail, but I don't know, maybe I'd like the AT. It just seems very crowded to me right now, because I think hiking is getting really popular. Great. Thru-hike is getting really popular. But that's not why I go out there. I don't go out there to party or meet a bunch of people. I go out there to have like a one-on-one connection with nature. So, and so it was like the North Country Trail definitely offered that. And what happened was I started in March in Lower Peninsula, Michigan, with the intention to walk back to North Dakota by late October, I think was my goal. And did great in Lower Peninsula, Michigan. Got into the Upper Peninsula, which is, if you start planning a hike, you'll learn that people will warn you and warn you and warn you and warn you about the UP being pretty rugged and remote, which it turned out absolutely to be on the western side. The eastern side's very fun and pretty easy hiking still. So, so I got into some trouble in the western side. I was basically like on a green cloud, as I think of it, until about mile 800. And that was right when I hit the trap hills. And so one part of outdoor activities is that you're extending your boundaries, like your safety boundaries, and there are practical parts of managing your body and that level of extreme physical activity that I just did not know how to do before I started this. And unfortunately, sometimes I have to learn things the hard way because I don't recognize what is happening until I'm already kind of at a danger point. So that's what happened in the trap hills, is I was probably borderline heat exhausted, and I started to get sick. Like it felt, anyway. So I had to go off trail for a while because I didn't know what was happening, honestly. I went home for a few days to kind of recover, and then I got back on trail, headed through Wisconsin, blew through Wisconsin, hit Minnesota, hiked up the Spirit Hiking Trail, was doing pretty great, and then hit the Boundary Waters. That was the other part about this trail. It's amazing. 100 miles through the Boundary Waters wilderness, like unparalleled, okay, for Midwestern hiking, I think. Right as I hit the boundary, actually I got about halfway down that, and then I got Giardia. So, and I have no idea how I got it. I really don't. I was doing all the right things, filtering my water and everything like that. So, so now the thing was, though, that I was already way behind schedule. There was no way I was making it to North Dakota at that point already, because it was kind of hilarious. I set off on this hike having never hiked more than 14 miles in a single day before, and somehow I thought I was going to be doing 25 miles a day consistently forever. I don't know. That did not happen. So, but that's okay. It was totally fine. I had an amazing time. I had a blast, and I'm really mad I got Giardia, because I think I probably would have hit 2,000. I think I would have gotten there, but I ended up getting 1,500. So,
you kind of walk me through the process of coming to peace with not hiking 25 miles a day, because just like watching your video when you're talking about it, you seem to have like ups and downs. Sometimes you'd be okay with it, sometimes you'd be really hard on yourself, and then you'd be like, it's not that big a deal.
I probably knew actually at mile 800 that I wasn't going to make it, but I couldn't admit it to myself, because there's kind of this, when you're out there physically pushing yourself past your limits on a daily basis, a couple interesting things happen. One is you kind of need that goal to be motivating you so that you continue to push yourself past your physical boundaries. And then also, as you are doing that, you discover that you totally can push yourself and be fine, right? So I got into a place where like I actually couldn't admit for a while that I wasn't going to be able to push past that physical boundary, because I'd actually done it successfully so many times on that trip even, right? I had learned, set totally new limit. I had explored totally new physical limits for myself successfully, but I could not get over that hump, and I just couldn't quite give up on it for a while. So I think it wasn't until I was actually, that was mile 800, and I think it wasn't until actually I put Alex through 500 more miles of that discussion before I finally was just like, F it, I'm doing 15 miles a day, okay? That's what's happening. And it's fine. And then I don't think I even did that some days. It's hard, you know, you invest money, time, you take this huge risk, you know, and like, again, this is something that I've thought a lot about. It's just like, we have this kind of accomplishment culture, you know, and I wanted the badge, man. I set the goal, and I want to accomplish this. And so I think I really wrestled with that. But that's kind of where, like, I still get caught up in that, where it's like, that's not, I mean, I think people who set those goals for themselves and accomplish them, I think I really respect them and admire them. So I wanted to be one of those people. But when it turned out that the goals I had set for myself were not realistic, based on lots of evidence every day, right? Yeah, I wish I had come to accept that earlier, because I feel like I was so focused on that I kind of missed out on just having a good time.
Let's talk about after the trail.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like coming back after the trail, like coming back into normal society? Was that difficult?
Bizarre. Yeah, you kind of are like, you're going through some stuff, but you can't really talk about it, because what you just went through is honestly just like a huge, like, privilege. So to then have this like really hard time coming off of it is, I don't know. I just didn't feel very comfortable talking about that with very many people. And I also didn't understand what was happening very well. And the phrase that people use for it a lot of times is trail depression, post-trail depression. And it just didn't feel right, right? Having had actual, like, experienced actual depression before, I'm like, this isn't depression. That's not what it is. But, somebody talked about it, I think that on Backpacker Radio, in this blog called The Trek, and she's also a long distance hiker, and she's also a PhD candidate. I think she's neuroscience or something like that. And her theory is it's grief. And that feels closer to me, because, you know, I think there's that stage of grief where, like, you can't actually, like, think about it too much because it's, like, too painful. Like, you miss it too much, you know, and that was what it felt like. It's like you're in love with somebody, so in love with them, and it's not even that they break up with you. It's just for some reason you can't be together anymore. Like, when your hike ends, it's not like the woods are like, get out, you know, like, there's no breakup, right? The woods still love you. They want you to come back, you know, but you can't, because you have to be back in real life and, like, earn money and feed yourself. So, and, like, return to reality. So it's this real struggle. And then there's all the things that you and I are talking about today. I feel like I still feel like really awkward when I really talk about them, even though, like, I know them deep down in my soul, right? I don't know why I'm so afraid of what people are going to think about me sharing things I've learned with a lot of hard work, okay? And trying to incorporate those into your life, bring that stuff over. It's actually, like, that's something I'm actively working toward every day, still trying to figure that out. You know, it's like, that's where I'm still talking about, like, I still struggle with, like, I have this idea of this expectation of what I want to be happening in my life. What I want to be happening in my life is that balance that you and I are talking about between modern life and having more of a connection. Having that connection in my life on a daily basis. I have not figured it out yet. Man, I've been trying ever since I got back. Honestly, I worry a little bit that I'm kind of a cautionary tale, though, because there's lots of stories out there of people who are like, yeah, I quit my job and then I got back and then I found a job and no big deal, you know. I think a lot of those people are very young. So I was mid-career, and like people were like, "You're crazy. What are you doing? Why are you quitting your job that you had for 7 years?" And it's like, I don't know, because I could get hit by a bus tomorrow, and I want to do this, right? So I did it, but like it was a hard reentry for me. It took me a long time to find another job that was paying me a similar wage. It was not where I wanted to be, you know. So I'm not going to lie to you. Like, you may go out and do this amazing thing. You will never regret it. As hard as it may be on the flip side, I have never regretted it a single second, but it has not been easy.
What are some of these things that you learned out there that you want to incorporate back into regular life?
The benefits of spending time in nature range from the smallest pleasures to I would say basically like spiritual awakenings for myself anyway. You know, anything from just the joy of finding a bunch of blueberries somewhere and how good they are, to feeling like, honestly, I felt like before I got into the kind of long-term, long-distance outdoor stuff I've been doing, I was completely unaware of about half of my body, and also just mind and soul. Like, there's something that woke up in me when I started doing those trips, this ancient knowledge that I'd been totally disconnected from in the way that I'd grown up and the way I was living my life, which was an indoor life. And that ancient knowledge, it just gifted me this like profound connection to where we live in this planet, and a whole new understanding of why we are the way we are and why our bodies work the way they work. And yeah. Well, the first thing that blows your mind, I think, when you start doing outdoor trips that involve more than packing up your car and driving somewhere, is that what I discovered is that my body is capable of way more than I understood. You know, I mean, before I started doing these trips, the idea of walking 3 miles to a store was ridiculous, you know, and to the point where I didn't even consider it something that I could do, despite being an athlete, despite being outdoors all the time when I was a kid. It just like, what? The idea that I could walk 23 miles in a day with 30 pounds of gear on my back and do that over and over and over for 5 months, you know, that's what wakes up. You realize like, oh, this is why I walk on 2 feet, because, you know, this is how we used to make a living. I'm absolutely built to do this day after day. So yeah, so it's just like, I was just completely blown away by what my body could do, and it's completely changed everything for me, of everything I understand about myself and what I'm capable of and what life can offer me and the kind of adventures I can have. It's pretty revolutionary.
So what would you say your relationship with your body was before, let's say, doing the NCT?
Oh gosh, my relationship with my body was heavily influenced by American culture, in the sense that I thought of my body more in the terms of how it looks. I don't know if this is a body thing. I guess it kind of is, but you know, how I looked and how I felt mentally, like those were my obsessions. And since doing these long trips, I just love my body with a ferocity that I did not have before. I kind of hated my body before. I'm kind of a thick girl, and you know, I had a lot of shame about that from a very young age, and now I just love it. I mean, because what I know is that is my strength and my power, my athleticism. That's where that lives. So I just can't. I'm never gonna hate my super strong legs like ever again. They've carried me 2,000 miles. I don't care that I carry a little bit of extra weight on my belly. Now that is just like, that's like my survival belly. I've got like 500 miles of ultralight calories right there, you know. So I don't know if you want me to talk about food, because actually I think backpacking has kind of ruined me. I used to be a pretty healthy eater, and now I'm like, I just can't turn it off. Nutella, I cannot quit you. But, well, this is kind of going back to the body image stuff, though, you know, that like, instead of thinking about my body and how it looks, now I just care about, like, is my body healthy, and am I taking pretty good care of it, and what it can do for me, right? And food is very similar in that backpacking totally changed my outlook on food and my understanding of how it interacts with my body. So I think an idea that really resonated with me was like, the French hate the way Americans talk about food, because we talk about food like it's medicine. And that's not what food is to the French. Food is an experience, right? It is a sensual experience meant to be enjoyed, you know? And instead, we're always trying to eat in a way that like magically programs us to feel better or go faster or be stronger or whatever, right? There's this kind of like, there's even a competition in how we eat. And so backpacking totally changed how I eat, because it like gave me permission to actually eat fat, right? Which I'd been like taught to avoid as a woman, especially a chubby woman. Like, I'm not allowed to have fat. And, you know, now I know that that's not a healthy way to backpack for sure anyway. I try not to eat a ton of it when I'm sedentary, but not like on trail. But on trail, like if I don't have fat, like I'm basically dying. So yeah.
Yeah, you need that stuff. Like
fat and salt. We do not. Yeah, you can't eat salt in sedentary life. But on trail, if you do not have salt, like you literally will die. And that is one of my other scariest experiences I've had on trail. I was overhydrating, and I did not have enough electrolytes and salt. And there's a condition you can get called hyponatremia. Like, we're all very educated about dehydration, but hyponatremia is basically the opposite. And it's just as dangerous. So yeah, so I started eating a lot more salt after that. Another thing that I noticed is that like my mental fortitude is pretty insane now. I think when I started out getting really into the outdoors, I had this expectation that I was going to be happy all the time, and I learned very quickly that that's not what happens. That's not what happens. But at the same time, you're like, what is happening is, even on days when I was struggling physically or mentally and kind of miserable, I was still like, I just felt totally different than how I feel at home, because I was using all of my skills. You know, you use your mind, your body, your smarts. You know, you like really have to be thinking out there in a way that you don't have to be thinking every day when you're just going to the grocery store. Kind of judging, like, you know, is the situation survivable all the time? And that just kind of it heightens your awareness and your presence in the current moment, and your awareness of your surroundings in this way that's intoxicating, like even when you're kind of struggling a little bit. So now I just think that like, it's not that I haven't had like days in this pandemic when things have been hard, but I do feel like I have coped with it pretty well. And I feel like that's what the outdoor has gifted me, is kind of this toughness. Yeah. I stopped living with the delusion that suffering isn't a part of life, a natural part of life, right? And it's not that I want to suffer, and I'm not gonna lie, I actively do everything I can to avoid suffering still. But when I can't avoid it, and it's just happening, I feel like there's just a part of me that's a little bit better prepared for that now. But in the beginning, it's miserable. I think like my very first day of backpacking, I thought I was gonna die, and I was like, what am I doing out here, you know? Yeah, you will have that thought many times if you do go down this path. You'll find yourself kind of waking up to like, I might die. in 5 minutes. What am I doing? But then it works out usually. I'm not done yet. No, and actually those moments are very, very rare. And half the time they're happening, I'm like, I don't know if this is just me being dramatic or if this is actually dangerous. But yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. That outdoor or backpacking or canoe, whatever, teaches you that suffering now pays off huge in the long run. I've stopped caring so much about failing too, because I fail a lot in the woods. There are days when I'm just like, everything I do, I've failed today. Like, I'm failing at how far I'm hiking. I failed because I fell off that rock. I am still actively in the process of untraining myself from being ridiculously hard on myself. It's something I've gotten much better at in the woods, because the woods teaches you really fast that it's not a productive way to be. It doesn't change anything. Being hard on yourself when you are suffering just makes the suffering worse. It doesn't alleviate it. So I've gotten better at it in the woods. In my regular life, I'm trying to get that into it. But I mean, man, 30 years before I started doing this stuff, that's a lot of habit to unlearn. So I still fall into it sometimes, but this is a dynamic, and it's a dynamic in the woods, and it's a dynamic in my life now, where I have an expectation of how I think things should be going, how I think my life should be going, what I want from my life, what I want from my hike, how far I want to go that day. And when I don't achieve that, it's basically an opportunity to hate myself. I don't really hate myself, but it's like be hard on myself. And I think what this and recovery too has started to teach me more of is just to I don't have to hate myself in that moment. I can just be like, oops, yeah, failure's a part of life. I failed today. Okay, I'll give it another shot tomorrow. So, and that's what definitely my hike on the North Country Trail was basically that for 5 months. I don't know if there was actually the days when I actually met the goal I had set for that day was rare. So that hike was a question of myself. I was asking myself a question like, am I this kind of hiker who can do what Alex does, which is amazing feats of physical strength and endurance? And there are a lot of people out hiking who can do that kind of stuff. And my last hike, I asked myself the question and I got my answer, which is no, because that's not what motivates me personally out there. And I'm totally cool with that. Like, I'm thrilled by that now that I've answered that question for myself. So if I get to have another big experience like that, I'll have more information. I'll get to make good choices and hopefully set expectations that don't give me the opportunity to choose to hate myself instead of just being in the moment, and just having a good time. So
on a bigger societal level, have we lost something from being disconnected with nature?
Because of the time I've spent out there, I've started to understand more and more what a huge loss that is. Yes, there are positives to living in really dense societies. There's no getting around the fact that where I live right now, there are 10 hospitals. If I have a major health event, like a fatal level health event, my chances of surviving that are much greater at my house in the city, right, than in the Trap Hills in the upper peninsula of Michigan. But I almost feel like there's this belief that's grown up. It's to me, I see cities are a natural evolution of humans continuously trying to improve that safety level in our lives. We live in these houses that are much better at standing up to crazy storms than you are when you're just camped out in a tent in the woods, for sure. That's a huge improvement, But then there seems to then alongside that has grown up this belief that anything that isn't modern living is super dangerous and unsafe. And what you said, that separation, it's we're not part of the natural system anymore. We've removed ourselves from it. And that's just not true, first of all. But I also think that removal, we've lost something super important, which is a love affair with where we live and how it just is on its own, not how we've shaped it to be. Honestly, I feel like sometimes what the wood does is just help me get myself out of my own way. It's like, because I don't have the constant distractions offered by modern life of my smartphone and my computer and, you know, calling my friends and watching TV or, you know, listening to podcasts or reading a book or something like that. Like, I feel like when I'm in the city, even when I kind of don't want to be, it's like really hard for me to stop this energy where I'm just like, I'm just like moving. You just gotta go, 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 go. Like, that's the vibe of modern living, right? You gotta be da, 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 da. And in the woods, there's just, I don't have that option. I'm just out there. And so it forces me to just relax. And so what I can find in the woods really easily is basically peace and serenity, like total peace and serenity. And I do think I think there are ways that you can find that in regular life for sure, but it's just way harder for me personally. I just am way better at it in the woods than I am in real life. And, or as other hikers have called it, synthetic life. I like that better than real life versus trail life. But I do think that the thing that I'm still convinced, and people keep trying to like disagree with me on this, and I finally just had to like give myself permission this year to be like, you know what, I'm sorry, but I have had this experience and you have not, which is living in the woods for months at a time, and how that makes me feel and how connected to life and, you know, every creature on this planet, from the trees to the earthworms to the weather. I mean, weather's not a creature, but you know what I mean? Like, just everything that occupies this planet, not just humans. I just feel this level of connection with it that there's like too much noise in at least the city where I live. I just can't feel the same kind of connection with the world around me. It's just too, I don't know. I feel like there's a wall between me and that, what I feel in the woods.
What are your views on spirituality in relation to nature?
Yeah, I think I'm definitely spiritual, and I finally have like just started to own in my own mind the fact that as an outdoor person specifically, I am a spiritual. That is the fundamental reason why I go out and do this, is because it's a spiritual experience for me. So yeah, I think that that's something that, especially over the last like 8-9 years, has been something I've been kind of mindfully pursuing.
Yeah, so what does that mean to you? Like, what is the human spirit? How do you visualize that?
I've given up needing to know or have a definition. It's more of a feeling for me. And it's definitely like this, it's just this kind of vast, golden, feeling inside. And in the woods too, like the woods, it just feels like it's just coursing through it all the time. Like when you're walking through the woods, even when I'm like surrounded by 200 mosquitoes, there's still like this I just feel this singing, you know? Like, I'm really bashful about talking about this stuff because I know I'm bashful about it because I don't think I do it justice. But like, I'll just go ahead and say it. Be vulnerable, right? I can feel the trees now. Like, I don't know how. It's really hard to describe it until, and I don't think that people will necessarily have the same experience as me out there. And who knows, maybe it's just I'm just making it all up in my head. But it just feels really real to me. Like, I can feel that they have something happening inside of them too. And it's not necessarily what's happening in us, but it's like this, still that golden force in the world. Like, I think of it as life force, like the thing that makes life happen. And I think one of the powerful experiences I had recently was, you see way more death out in the woods than you do in modern life. That's another thing that's very different. Like, death is everywhere. You're constantly finding, winter wolf kills deer. And I remember standing over this skeleton that was totally bleached, totally clean. It was just bones and hide left. And it's such a juxtaposition, because here are like the totally clean bones, but then the hide looks like you could pet it. Like, it just looks like a live deer, it's barely degraded. And so here's this kind of violent scene. Like, that this deer probably died hard. It's torn apart. And it's jolting for me because I'm not used to seeing death like that. And at the same time, I'm standing over this carcass and this kind of violent thing. The woods is just vibrating around you with life. There are birds and snakes, and the trees are rustling, and you can feel, like, when you spend that much time in the woods continuously, you really can feel everything growing around you because you see it changing every day. So it's just like, and so all of that is happening at the same time. I'm standing over this dead creature, and it's like nature telling me, yep, death happens, violence happens, but life goes on. And that was just like really beautiful for me. So that's the kind of experiences I have as this, kind of spiritually, I think, out there. And that's why I go out there. I think what it has done is helped me live with like two ideas in my head at the same time, which is like, okay, so I'm really lucky, and I'm on this planet, and I'm in this body, and I'm this person right now. And of course, I'm very invested in that person's existence and what happens to me. But at the same time, it's a really comforting idea that I'm not the center of the universe. And that life is going to go on beyond me. It is going on outside of me. And that's one thing that's, absolutely. I think I was very human-centric before I started out doing outdoor activities. And now I'm just like, I think that everything that is alive on this planet has an equal right to be here. And we should be very careful and mindful of how we harvest. Everything harvests. Like, that's another natural part of life, right? I mean, animals harvest, plants harvest. It's just part of the system. But I think for me, I try to do it in a way that's like the least amount of impact I can have. I try now. In our culture, we're constantly being sold, and it creates this idea of like what you need in life that is, it turns out, for myself anyway, what I've learned is I do not. I do not need about 90% of what is being sold to me on a daily basis. So that's kind of the balance I've struck with, that is that, I don't own a lot of clothing. I own the clothing I use. And I'm very careful before I buy new clothing, because I'm just like, do you really need this, or you just think you need it? And I think a lot of people are having that impulse now. That's not necessarily just woods, but it's like, basically when I started hiking, I got rid of about 90% of what I owned, and I have not missed any of it. None of it. In fact, and it's a huge freedom, because, I basically know exactly what I need, and it all fits in a backpack. Like, that's my baseline. Anything above that now is just kind of like luxury. And I like luxuries, don't get me wrong. I mean, everybody does, but I just have a lot less of them than I used to.
Would you recommend these long distance hikes for everyone?
My mom will never sleep in a tent, ever. And I love her, and that is okay. I don't think that she's missing out or having or like, I don't feel like I'm not trying to convince her, like, no, you got to go do this, right? Because she knows herself, and she knows what fulfills her, right? But I think that for those of us who enjoy the woods, getting stuck and thinking of it as just like a vacation spot is really robbing yourself of the full experience. It's only like, that's like 10% of what's out here. There's so much more. I will say this, if you are someone who enjoys the woods, I really think that this is one of the most amazing gifts that you can give to yourself in your entire life, okay? It's on par with getting married, having children, going to college. Like, it's that level of life experience. It's insanely powerful. I think, honestly, the best way to do it is to have one experience in your life where you just go out in nature and release that control. Put yourself at the mercy of nature and figure out how to live inside of the rules of nature instead of outside of the rules of nature. And what you find in there is, I mean, when I tell like kids, when I'm talking to kids about backpacking, it's magical, man. It's like the closest thing I've experienced in my life I've had to going to Hogwarts. I'm not even gonna lie, like that's what it feels like. You're just like, whoa, this is magic.
And don't forget to subscribe here on YouTube and follow us on social media to stay up to date with this project.